Oh. This is nice. This is kind of like smooth jazz. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our new podcast. I've got Zach Ramshackle and Josh Barker here.
Yo, it's Zachy Ramshackle and Bad Luck Barker.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about Collision Conference. I'm excited to finally debrief because you and I haven't talked one word since the conference. Although we've done like jokes that we've had on the trip back and forth, which made
a ton of them.
Yeah, turn off our video while we were on video. But talk to me a little bit about. I'm going to play this as a backgrounder. This is a little bit of the scale. Talk to me a little bit about while this is going. What Collision Conference? How was it? High level.
Yeah.
What did we accomplish and what did we do?
So Collision was massive. Okay,
Yeah.
First of all, there was 40,000 people for this conference, maybe a little bit more. It was also the same week in Toronto. They had two other conferences going that were very well attended. So Toronto was just packed.
Yeah.
Then you have the layer of it was 86 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
The whole week.
Oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Turn that off.
That's wonderful.
My face. Let's fast forward this. Keep going. Keep going.
But the conference was amazing. There was a lot of buzz, a lot of hot topics going on. AI was talked about quite a bit. We can get into that a little bit later. But outside of that, it was really cool to see the mix of there was pitch competitions going on throughout every single day of the conference. And the last day, there was actually awards. There was a ton of really great speakers at the conference. And what was really intriguing to me, this was actually one of the first conferences I've been to where there was kind of a class system.
It was weird.
There as well.
Did
that feel weird to you?
I felt really weird to me. It was on the badge, they had your class, right? Like we got free tickets through the Right Place, call out to Right Place in Grand Rapids. They're awesome. So we got tickets and we just said attendee on ours. And so we almost like looked down upon, I feel like.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you're just an attendee, so.
Yeah. It was super interesting for me, like walking the floor every single day and immediately eyeballs go right to your badge.
Yeah.
And if you're not like an investor or you're there to, hand out cash to some new budding startup, it was like conversations were not being had.
Yeah.
So that was a super interesting dynamic throughout the week at Collision. But outside of that, I mean, just a fantastic time to really see where the actual movers and shakers are.
Yeah.
And I think it was interesting for me too, because AI was almost like a barrier to figure out like who's actually like doing the great stuff here. Like everyone had something around AI. Everyone was talking about AI. So to actually find those who were, pushing the envelope, you had to sift a little bit, which was intriguing to me. So
it was. With the AI conversation, it was like the typical. I think you and I were a little surprised because we had thought the Gartner hype cycle of like the hype of AI. I had thought at least was we were starting to get in the trough of disillusionment, like past this heightened expectations. But it was clear that everyone still had these heightened like AI, like the entire everything. I think every single session we attended had some AI angle to it, and so. It was crazy. And there's a ton of startups there, and a lot of the startups I felt like were solving problems that didn't exist. That's a really interesting thing to see. It's like their .ai in their name kind of gave them like buzz, but like when you talk to them, they weren't utilizing it in a way I would have expected.
Yeah. I mean, I got the sense. So at Collision, there's essentially two different classes for up and coming startups. There was like the alpha and then the beta.
There's growth too, right?
And then there's growth. So I guess there's three different classes. And I would say between those three different classes, probably 70% of them were doing something in the AI arena, and nothing really like jumped out at me as, oh, that's actually really unique and fascinating. There were probably a handful at most, right?
There's one of them. Maybe we can throw it up here really quick and talk through it. Let me throw it up on the screen. Aphrodite. You want to talk about that for a second?
Yeah, for sure. So we had the honor of interviewing the founder of Aphrodite, Abby, and so it's essentially geared directly at anyone who's in the marketing agency realm And it helps with multivariate testing, which is a very taxing, very very tedious process that happens with anyone who's handling, SEO or any sort of ad campaign with hefty ad spend. It actually solves something that many agencies waste human hours doing, and it's not fun work. It's not creative work. So this is one where we'll definitely I think this week we're going to be posting the video for Aphrodite.ai in that interview, but definitely go and check this out if you're in the agency world or if you're handling your ad spend internally.
Yeah.
This was a really cool one.
I thought so too. It was one of the things I think you and I talked about. So this one is with A/B testing. It basically trains a model on your personas you're targeting, and then you throw out to the AI, like it shows an example of different images, and then effectively uses AI to train these personas and say, oh, this persona would choose this one, right?
Yeah.
So it's almost mimicking A/B testing, and you're throwing it to an AI to select it. So there was a lot of conversation, I think, between you and I of like, well, this would probably be good as before sending it to an audience, because the AI still has to make assumptions based on all the information it knows, and that's what it is. It's just assumptions still. But this would be good, I think, if you were looking at desk research as a precursor to sending it out to the audience. That's what I think you and I arrived at, is like this might be a good option to kind of give it a litmus test.
Yeah, so. I mean, coming from the agency world, the other arena that I think this could really, really do well in is anyone that's in like B2C marketing, where there's like a ton of different SKUs that you're having to push ad campaigns behind. Just having the speed behind you to be able to test those images like with a model, get some images, and like actually speed up your idea creation, like to then be able to refine that further, like with the human element. That to me seems really, really powerful. Yeah. So this was one that, again, we'll have the interview. It'll be posted out, so definitely check it out.
Yeah. The cool thing about talking to the founder was she definitely was a proponent of like, make sure you don't build anything unless you know your know your customer. And so it was funny to see her reaction where it was like, I did it all wrong. You know what I mean? And so that video will be a cool little thing for everyone to go check out.
Yeah, so. And she was really speaking the language that we believe in, where she said you have to go on this learning journey, like to be able to create something great. You have to be able to like dedicate yourself to learning along the way and making mistakes. And I really appreciated her saying that. So, yeah,
it's good. So what other things did we learn going to the conference? Was it was it a success, you think, in our mind? Like what was your take on things in terms of learnings?
Yeah, I walked away feeling that it was definitely a success. Anyone that has had a booth at a conference or has presented at a conference, the feeling of having a booth and not getting the traction that you're desiring, right? Yeah. So I think the fact that we went in there and we actually had like this interview series really kind of rose us above the noise. And I was really excited, with the results that we got and the conversations that were able to be had. And outside of that, I think more and more conferences that I've gone to, the booths really aren't the attraction. It was really interesting to me to see like there was a couple booths that had like games at it, like Chuck E. Cheese, like roll the ball game, or like race car games and stuff. Those are the ones that were getting all of the traction, all of the attention. And then those that were at the booth were able to sell in the process. So I think it kind of challenged my mind of like, okay, is the conference landscape actually in need of like change? Right. So that was probably, a great learning that we walked away with.
Yeah,
so.
I think we had the mindset of if you're a startup or you're a person looking to attend this conference, it's like, the question we asked ourselves, would you like attend? And so I think that's a hard question to answer, because I think you and I arrived at the difficulty I think people had. If I'm a startup, like even Aphrodite, like, and maybe that's a poor example because this is pretty applicable universally, but if there's other startups, and we looked at build environment startups, we looked at in the sciences startups, the difficulty is as people are walking around 40, 50,000 people, you don't know if that person's in your target market, right? So it's just, they're trying to attract people into their booth, but they have no idea if that person's a target. So we were talking about things like, hey, if you're a startup, you're a venture, and let's say you're in the build environment, rather than going to a technology conference like Collision, go to an industry conference like an architecture conference or a build environment conference and be the only SaaS or be the only technology provider there.
Yeah. And again, I think like anything, it's the pre-planning that makes all the difference. Right? So, even a lot of these startups that were, they had their mini booth there, maybe they were an alpha or beta class or a growth class. If you weren't setting meetings to have at the show pre that week, you were probably not getting the face time that you were looking for at that conference, just because it is literally a sea of people in a conference that had a lot of stuff going on, right? So, pre-planning is definitely the way to go for, moving forward. So
I know you worked with Bryce on, who's sitting over here in the corner, but he worked with Bryce on getting these lined up, because I know he helped you kind of do a scraping of some of the site to figure out who to talk to, and that was key for us to get those conversations rolling, because other than that, we would just, everyone's so busy. There are speakers giving talks, there are people managing booths. It's like, it worked really well for us to do quick, rapid 5-minute interviews with people.
Totally.
So
Totally. Yep.
We talked to some cool people too. I'll bring up KPMG. Like we hear some videos. Well, I'm not going to turn an audio on, but we built these 5-minute videos we'll be posting, and so we were able to talk to KPMG as well. By the way, side note, you did not tell me my collar's sticking up in the middle of this. I was like, I feel like an idiot, like we're posting this and I'm like all mangled, Where's Bryce? Because Bryce would tell me.
That's why I should have been there. It was a surprise. I was just, leaving you for later.
Oh man, yeah. So I watch this now with like my eyes shut, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm an idiot. This guy's looking at me like, wow, he's pretty ramshackled. So
it's just windy in there.
Yeah,
that's all.
It was. Okay, to be fair, I did fix your collar earlier in the day.
I propped it up. I just was trying to look cool, or something.
You thought you were in the '90s listening to Nelly, and you popped your collar back up. That's not on me, man. Okay.
But we talked to Daniel Resnick. He's a cool partner that really shares a lot of our philosophy. That was also a cool communication with him, of like when we were talking with KPMG, him talking about rapid testing, experimentation. And so it was really neat to hear him talking about corporate innovation and how he's helping clients with that. I thought that was kind of cool. It's a bigger company helping people do that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these larger corporations that we talked to in this interview process, it was really interesting that a lot of them, like the innovation isn't just one mastermind in a company ever. It really is like a team effort. And I think the way that Daniel framed that up to how they're handling innovation at KPMG Canada was a really cool conversation that you had. So
My alma mater there. So that was kind of cool to go back and talk to someone from KPMG. So yeah. Well, tell me a little bit. You and I should probably talk about other things on the trip, the fun things of the trip. So you should you like lean into that. How did the trip? Because the trip started with a bang at Border Patrol.
Yeah, sure did. Sure did. So, okay, anyone who has ever, crossed into Canada or going across borders, right? There's normally a list of things that you shouldn't say while you are at the checkpoint. And, I consider myself a relatively honest guy. I like to talk to people.
You were very honest.
I was very honest.
Let's be real. We drove up to the border, and I'm sitting here. I remember I was like, all right, Zach, keep it high level, man. We're going to a conference, right? We prepped for this. He like rolls up to the window, and he's like, officer, we're here to see a conference, but we're also interviewing 10 different people. We're talking about innovation, and we're selling things, and we're collecting money from people. We also have drugs under the car. It was like super honest, and I'm like, oh no. And he like looks at you, and he goes, oh, you're interviewing people.
Yeah.
What people are you interviewing? Oh, like you're actually taking money out of here? What do you take? And he's like, go over here.
Yes.
And it's like, so we got pat down, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Multiple times,
verbally,
actually.
I'll say.
Yeah. No, but it was one of those things. Like the moment I said interview was like
Game
the
over.
red flag.
Trigger.
It was like you need to get checked.
Yeah,
and it was bad on my part. I will say though, going back home, it went so much more smooth.
But did you say all those things?
No, I just said, hey, we attended a conference. It was great. And he said, welcome home. And it was wonderful. So, lesson learned there. But yeah, that was an interesting start to the trip. And then that leads us into our second massive voyage in the trip. So coming into this conference, this was probably the first time I've booked my own travel in, when I say like 5 to 7 years, like literally 5 to 7 years. This is the first time I've like booked the hotel and like figured out like, you know, the commute and all that kind of stuff. And there's a reason for that, is what you came to find out pretty quickly.
We're gonna put this up here. This is you know, we might need to blur the place that we arrived at, but I'm sitting here in the car as he's checking in, and I'm reading reviews, and I'm like, oh, this looks really good, man. I mean, I don't even see 1 2-star at this point, you know. So as I'm scrolling through, and so that's how we started. So should I pull up some photos? Do you want me to pull up some photos of the interior?
Well, so in my defense, here's the interesting thing. So I booked like our hotel through Expedia.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Expedia, it was a strong like 3.75 stars, which for me, like travel wise, I'm like,
approved.
That's pretty fine, right?
Yes.
And that's the Dutch side of me, like really getting to me. But then you pulled this up on your phone as I was walking into the hotel lobby, and you were frantically texting me like, what is this? Are we going to get scanned? Should we find a different place? I'm like, no, it's fine. And then we actually get into the hotel, like checked in.
This is a good story. So we walk up, and I think this is one of the first things I see. And I will say some brown tinting to the carpet in many places. We also opened up, you know, a one of the drawers, and there was various nails, a balloon, you know, of sorts. And so I don't know where we arrived at, because this was also under the bed, propping the bed up. And I'm not even exaggerating. Like, we saw the end of the handle sticking out of the bed, and I was like, it's propping it up. What is this? And
but all the while, we're finding this out. There's also 0 lights on.
Yes.
There's no electricity, and we're turning on every single light switch, and we're like, there's no power here. The air conditioning's working, but there's no power. And we're trying to figure out all these light switches, but the bedside lamps worked.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So we ended up getting the power figured out, which was...
And in that moment, though, when we couldn't figure out the power, there was a look we gave each other of, we're probably going to have to switch hotels. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. We were just like that lost, and we finally figured it out.
We did.
We hit one light switch as you enter, and that turns and controls all of the light switches.
Yes.
So, yeah, it was weird. Canadians are either that's a Canadian thing or that's a weird thing in our place.
You know, judging by the 1.8 stars,
it's probably
I would say it's a
place thing,
not just a Canadian thing.
Yeah. So this frying pan was propping up Zach's bed.
Yeah.
So I lifted it up and he pulled it out, and I don't think we could control our laughter at that point. And it was crazy. So
we cooked in it later, and it was well seasoned. Believe it.
And you know, to all this craziness, what was the icing on the cake? It really was the cherry on top. The whole thing was disheveled, right? Like everything was disheveled, and it was just like, it was a mess. We were just like, no wonder this is like 1 star. But this was in the bathroom, like a nice flower. Yeah, on like they had made this in every bathroom. It was 2 bathrooms.
Yeah,
and that kind of threw me into the 1.25 star category. You know, so it kind of edged me over.
Well, that's good.
But I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, who would spend time creating a toilet paper flower when everything else
that threw me into the abyss? Let me just tell you, that put me over the edge.
So it was a wild trip in our hotel.
Yes.
So
we made the most of it, though.
But I will also say, so that we thought that was some of our hotel experience. But the other thing that I will say is that it was hot.
It was very hot.
I mean, this is when the heat wave came through. Right?
Yes.
So our hotel was how many kilometers away? Like 3 or 4 from the conference.
3 at most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not even. It's like a mile and a half.
Yeah.
And we took an Uber the first day. And how long? Like, what was that? 45 minutes?
It was 45 minutes.
And we bailed.
We bailed at like minute probably 42.
Yes.
Because it would have taken us an extra 10 minutes to make one turn.
Yes.
To get into the conference. So it was wild. Like the commute stuff was wild. So we ended up abandoning that very quickly. And second day we walked to the conference.
Yes.
Big mistake.
Talk about we got there sweating like crazy.
So bad. And we learned, actually, second day was also when we learned what a squall warning
which I thought
like
was
in
fake.
Canada. Yes.
I thought it was something from District 9, like squall, there's a squall warning, it's coming from the sky, but it wasn't.
No, it definitely wasn't. So we're getting ready in the hotel to walk to the conference, and I get an alert on my phone for a squall warning. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I don't know what that is. And, we start walking, and it was like 86 that day.
We found the squall.
I searched it later at the conference, and I was like, oh, the squall warning is when there are hot winds that raise the temperature up to 8 to 10 degrees hotter than what it was. So that day in Toronto, as we are walking to the conference, it felt like 94 to 96 degrees as we were walking there. It was
roasting.
Oh my gosh, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was really bad.
So we found the solution to all of our travel problems, which looked kind of like this: me riding a bicycle. This is the solution to our problems. So we found in the U.S. there's a service called Lime.
Yeah.
There it's called, what is it? I mean, lemonade,
orange,
or some other fruit. I can't remember what it was, but
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that video work, guys.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Return after you
It's
start
pretty good.
recording.
I mean, that is like a sin to do that. So now we're looking sideways, but we still arrived sweaty, just less sweaty. So
There's at least a breeze that we're creating by our own body power.
a little bit of the squall
Yeah.
in there, but it was good. So
It was fantastic.
it was a good little trip there.
You can't be angry if you're riding a bike.
That's true. You can't be angry watching Josh ride a bike. You just
Well, I guess not.
Yeah.
you're like, that looks pretty ridiculous.
But
Yeah.
Zach, you discovered that Josh has no clue how to dress for the weather. The same thing happened in Austin when we were at South by Southwest. If it was a hot day, he was dressed for winter. If it was a cold day, he was dressed for summer. He just can't get it.
I couldn't get it right, and it's so true.
Yeah.
But he joined me.
No?
You wore like a coat and stuff too.
I did.
So we
did.
were in that together. But the thing that I will say is, I wish, like Rachel, my wife, she was like, "How was it?" And I was like, I wish I would have looked at the weather ahead of time, because I would have been like 96 degrees. I think I need an extra pair of clothes because I'm gonna sweat through these. And didn't.
Yeah.
So that was
Okay, you did bring wool suit coats though. That is one thing I did notice, like right out of the gates. I was like, that's full on wool, like herringbone suit coat. Like that's gonna be hot.
It was very hot. Yeah, that was a huge mistake. Huge mistake. So we also, let's talk about the fun. So we had some fun too, right?
Yeah, we did.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah, so we have a recent client in the Toronto area who we went to dinner with, and then we went to what series is like Division something? I'm not.
I thought it was Major League Soccer.
It is Major League.
Yeah.
Then. Okay. All right. See, this is how much I know about the soccer world. All I've watched is Ted Lasso. I'm sorry, but we went to a Major League Soccer game. Toronto played Nashville.
Yeah.
Which was super fun, and man, that was rowdy.
It was super rowdy.
It was rowdy in a really good way. So yeah, a great time. They had like to the left in the field. They had
like there.
Yeah, like down there. They had probably 50 people just doing a full-on drum circle.
Yep.
The whole game, like no breaks.
Yep.
Just drums and chants and everything. So it
Face paint.
the
whole bit.
the whole thing. So that was a really really great time.
Yeah, it was good. And one of the things that I noticed is that Canadians, they love to fight.
They really
They
do.
really do. Like we were in there and I was like, this isn't, I don't think it's hockey season, but I think they wanted it to be. And so they got into a brawl on the field, and I almost felt like they were going to chanting, "Kill him, kill him!" And yeah, exactly. They're like, shoo. And so it was a ton of fun to watch. It was just, man, they know how to have a good time.
It was a good
So,
time. I will definitely put it on my list to go to another Major League Soccer game. That was actually a good amount of fun.
It was fun. They lost. Toronto lost,
They did.
but afterwards, I turned to our customer and I said, "What do we do now? Do we flip a car and burn it?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'll support that."
Start some full-on riots. So that's what we did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think he had the exact words he said was, "I will bail you out if you do that." So
That's true.
That's what I think he said. So, but overall, good trip to Toronto.
Yeah, it was
right?
fantastic. Yeah.
Any other things you would want to pull out? I mean, I think some high points or some lessons learned from this was, man, if you're going to a conference, have a plan, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so advising people if they're going to a conference, go to a conference that's maybe industry specific, or if you don't, cherry pick and find the people you want to talk to far ahead of time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if you were to put together a rough conference playbook, right? The pre-planning portion, if you have a good 4 to 6 weeks pre a conference to actually line up those meetings, you are going to feel so much better like the week of that conference, especially if it's like a 2-day blitz type of conference where you have a super limited amount of time. That pre-planning portion really makes the difference. And then I would say outside of that, like understanding the class system before you get there. Because again, I think that took both of us kind of off, hit us a little off guard. But pre-planning is everything.
Yeah. It was weird talking about the class system for a second too. It was interesting because there were certain designated areas you couldn't get to unless you had that badge.
Right.
So it was interesting because one of the people that messaged us during the conference that reached out to us, we had a good conversation. We should maybe talk about that for a second, but we had a good conversation. But they were in was it the startup area or the investor area? It's like one of the two.
They were in the startup area.
Startup. Yep. Yeah. And since we only had attendee badge, they had like bouncers. Really.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let you in the area, which is weird because it was like an open area and you could wave to them and then they'd be like, oh, they'd have to come out.
Talk to them across the little table. Like,
yes.
Yeah, that was a little interesting, but great conversation with them.
Yes.
So they were using AI for facial recognition and tracking for venues, right?
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit about we essentially gave them an innovation assessment
on the spot
at the conference, which was really fun to do. So.
It was interesting because it was a development team that turned into they were wanting to create a product, right? And so they wanted to become a product company. The product was tracking the number of people entering and exiting a venue, right? So it was just computer vision stuff of like, hey, someone walks in, count 1. Another person walks, count 2, and then they would track how many people in and out. So it was interesting to see, us talking with them on, I think they were caught off guard when they're like, yeah, our plan is to hire a marketing company. I totally cut them off and was like, I wouldn't do that. That's a bad idea. And
you should stop.
You should not do that. And so, but it's a good lesson because I mean, what we got to talk about with them was effectively, you don't have a spark yet in your business. You don't know who your target market is. You don't know your channel strategy. And if you were to put like a marketing company on this, they're like, well, let's pour gasoline on something that already has traction when it doesn't, So it was a really good conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting because their story, like they were literally planning to move to, so they're based in Canada, and they were planning to move to a major region in the U.S.
Yes.
And our advice to them was essentially, hey, go and validate those markets before you end up moving your team to grow your product. So, again, I think the thing I left with most from Collision Conference was like, validation still isn't talked about enough in the startup world or even in like the corporate world, right? So, there's definitely a gap there that needs to be filled that can save a lot of pain and heartache and burned time investment, cash investment for anyone who's running a new venture.
Yes.
So,
the concept of sell first, build later is just lost on majority of the startups, right? So that's really what we advise them on is like, you need to go out and sell, target, and they were very much of the strategy of we're going to double down on one area when they'd only gotten one customer. And it was like, that could be a false positive. We talked about that with them about saying you really should cast a wide net in the marketing terms of like growth marketing and testing and experimenting to see which one to kind of double down on. So it was interesting.
And this was also without even doing some of like the basic brushstrokes of like sales, right?
Yes.
Like go out and talk to 50 people.
Yes.
Like get some data behind you before you're doubling down on this and potentially using that false positive to inform the direction of your venture. So
Yes.
Really interesting conversation. Great that, we had it with them. But yeah, Collision was a blast.
It was a blast. Yeah, and I'll say
Can I ask a question about Collision?
Yeah.
Did they address the name change? Did
No,
you see that?
they saw Web Summit is the new one, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know if we stuck around enough to know, because like we left a little early. I don't know if in the last day they maybe addressed that. I didn't receive any communication on the change.
They addressed the name change actually the first night at the welcome party.
Did they?
thingy.
Oh, we missed the
Yeah.
welcome party.
Yeah,
Gotcha. Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's where they addressed
Because
it.
they are erasing Collision Conference from the internet.
Yes, I noticed that.
You can't find it anywhere now.
Yes.
So, yeah, it looks
Which
like
is
Web
weird.
Summit is what it's going to be in the future.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think in Vancouver next year.
Yep.
Yeah.
2025 May.
Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? And I want to hit on this real quick. In terms of pre-planning and conference planning, what I did really appreciate about Collision is their app was very well developed for a networking tool. So, that's something that, as people are looking to plan like, their quarterly conferences or whatever your frequency is, like those apps came in clutch for us to like actually set up a lot of these pre-meetings, and it doesn't always have to be through like email or calling or whatever. That's something that I really appreciate about Collision. It'll be interesting to see if Web Summits now keeps that going into next year. Because it was great. They had all their different tracks on there. You could do your scheduling. You could set up pre-meetings. Like it was pretty well done on the app side.
I thought so too. That startup we were just talking about, that in computer vision counting people, it was random. You and I were sitting at a table next to the startup area, and I get a message on my phone through the app that's like, "Hey, I'd love to pick your brain," and they literally were like, "Where are you?" And we're only like 50 feet away from them. It's like, and I messaged them back and I was like, "Oh yeah, we have some time now. We're here." And they just stood up and we like pointed at each other and we just started talking. So it was kind of
So you can message other attendees through the app?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it was cool, and you can target them. So you can, based on your interests. So you have to. Every person requires like their interests and what kind of we're a venture studio, what kind of company you are. So there's advanced search capability. So I'm sure they found Zach and I, and we're like, these are some people we need to talk to.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's the best conference app I've ever heard of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They still have the app up. It'll be interesting to see how long they have it up if they're erasing Collision from the internet.
Can you still message people through it?
Yeah.
I did yesterday.
Yeah. It's interesting because you and I didn't have I didn't see that kind of functionality with South by Southwest.
Oh, it's horrible. Their app is awful.
Yeah. It was terrible. So in comparison, this is just in a different planet of helpful. So
that was a really great feature to have for Collision. So
the only thing I would have said what would have been cooler, and this might, I don't know if this edges on Stalker, is if you could go to a person and search if they checked that they were going to attend a session. You know what I mean? I think that would be kind of cool to see who attended what session.
Yeah.
In the hands of a user, but it also could be abused, I'd imagine. So.
Yeah, I would probably say so.
Yeah, I think that's too far.
Dang it! I'm getting shot down by two. I'm gonna hold to my guns. I still think it'd be cool.
Yeah.
So
it would be great.
Cool. Well, good chatting. It was a great conference. Would we do it again?
Yes.
I think
let's do it again next year in Vancouver.
Let's do it. Web Summit. May 2025.
Is it in May?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's my birthday month.
Birthday there. Is this a new outro too? I like it. Is this another intro option? Nice.
This is great.
I like it.
That's good.